And let's see here. I think it should be working. Yeah, I'm starting to see a couple of the comments coming through, so we'll give another 30 seconds for everybody to join in before we do the introductions, because I have a feeling this is going to be a fun way to end the day of TMF Week with this action-packed and star-studded panel. So hello to everyone. If we can see a few more hellos, just to make sure that people are on here and that we are streaming properly, it would be greatly appreciated. What we'll do is we'll kick it off. You know what? Let's kick off the introduction as it starts right now. So today's session, guys, we're going to be jumping in, and maybe the best way to introduce this group is with a little bit of music. Of course, it stops. All right. With that introduction, I think we're gathering up what I'll call Yodas of the industry, their insight and knowledge. Today's panel session, day 3, is going to be data-driven deliverables, the D3O of sponsor Oversight, the cousin of C3PO. Just before we turn it over to the team, just a couple of housekeeping pieces. And again, guys, if this is a session, apologies for the repetition, but please engage in as many questions as possible. Our speakers are going to be excited to answer them, jump into the questions, and certainly I know that between everybody on this panel, there's going to be somebody that just wants to offer some great insight. This session is being recorded as well. It will be available after the conclusion of TMF Week in the TMF dashboard, and of course that'll be available on the site. So before I turn this over, just a quick introduction. Jamie Toth, who is going to be the moderator of this panel. Of course, you have probably seen her throughout TMF Week. She's part of the advisory board, big helping hand to making this possible. She is currently the Senior Director of Clinical Systems and Records at IT Santio. And Jamie, I'll turn it over to you at this point, just to help introduce the rest of the panel.
Thanks so much, Mike. So I'm going to have the panel introduce themselves before I kick it off. So if we can start with Kate.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Santoro. I am the Associate Director of eTMF at Bluebird Bio. Have been in the TMF industry for quite some time now, and I'm really looking forward to our chat today.
And Mo?
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. My name is Mo Fosay. I'm a Senior Director here at Worldwide Clinical Trials, a CRO. I've been in the industry around 17 years now, primarily looking after their TMF program. So yeah, looking forward to hear your questions today.
And Mary?
Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Brandner. I'm the Senior Director of Global Development Operations at Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals. I've been in the industry over 30 years. I have to tell you, when I started, TMFs were paper. So I have been doing eTMF work for probably over 15 years, and I've led a bunch of different groups and had different areas of TMF involvement, from actually loading documents in all the way up to overseeing what CROs are doing and internal teams are doing. So I'm happy to be here today.
Thanks so much. And Karen?
Hi, I'm Karen Freed. I am with Merck. I've been working with TMFs for now about 37 years. So my entire career in the pharma industry has been with the TMF. Obviously started as paper and then now with eTMF. Some of my main responsibilities in my position here at Merck are working with the Actress trials and anything that involves migrating a TMF into our TMF. So it also includes mergers and acquisitions. So everything where there's TMF coming in and doing oversight of those TMFs.
Thanks so much. And finally, Tanya.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tanya Huggins. I'm a director in TMF operations at Syneos Health. I have a little over 10 years dedicated TMF management experience working for larger CROs. Some of my experience includes multiple TMF systems, working within processes and development and implementation within those systems, system migrations, and then client relationships and building out how we as a CRO can work within the sponsor eTMF system and working those processes and collaboration out together. So I'm really excited to be here today.
Thanks so much. And Mike, I am going to ask the panel to go on and off mute because I'm still hearing some feedback. So if you all can go on and off mute if you're not actually speaking, that would be awesome. So thanks everyone for being here today. So I think, so you've heard who we are, so we want to find out who you all are. So Mike, if we can do poll number 1, that would be fantastic. So poll number 1, we're just kind of at, this is a simple question. Poll number 1 is going to ask, where do you work? Because we want to know who's the audience. And I'm going to do a couple shout outs while we're waiting for that poll to come up. So shout out to Fran Ross and to Russell Joyce. I think that's all I can see in the chat at the moment without scrolling, because they have mentioned something in the chat. So Mike, is the poll coming up? I can't tell.
It is. There's.
Thank you. All right.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, it's coming through. I can end the poll in just a little bit. The numbers keep varying around, which is interesting. I think it'll be interesting numbers. I'll let you guys dissect this.
Okay,
so
cool.
I'll end it now, so that way we get the last beam going once, twice, sold.
All right, so we've got 13.7% who are other. So we want to know who those folks are. About 50% sponsor, 29% CRO, 7% or 8% vendor, and then about 14% other. So all of you other people, let us know who you are. That'd be great. And what company that you're represented. All right, so as you heard, our intro music. So you could put in the chat what that music is, and hopefully you all have heard that music before. As Mary talked about paper seems like decades and decades ago, and maybe is a distant memory to people. But if you're a fan of Star Wars, like myself, Star Wars came around 44 years ago. So talk about decades old and still standing the test of time. So our trial master files also have to stand the test of time, right? Many of us, I know I'll be out on an island in Bora Bora when I retire, and I won't have to worry about the trial master file, 10 years from now. But that retention for the trial master file still has to be retained for 25 plus years. So the TMF stands the test of time, just like Star Wars. And certainly, if you're like me, I watch the movies annually with my boys. We rewatch it. We have many of their little characters that have also stood the test of time. So we're talking about futuristic, which even when Star Wars came out back in the 70s, people were like, oh my gosh, that's a future that we'll never see. But here we are 44 years later. And so definitely over the last 5 years, just in the TMF space, and the TMF reference model has been around for a decade, folks, in case you didn't know that. So even the TMF reference model is standing the test of time. So, but over that time, things have evolved, right? So we evolved the TMF reference model, and we're also evolving our oversight. So when I was talking to the panel about what does oversight mean to them, the theme of D3O, right, really came to light. And so that's now data-driven decisions for oversight, where in the past it was like, oh, let me look at that paper and let's look at the tracker. And now with technology, with the systems today, our oversight has become even more perhaps simplistic to do, but it still requires a lot of rigor. So we're going to hear from the panel today, and hopefully if you were watching the sessions from Daniel Bennett and Steph Viscomi, as well as Nicole Weigel earlier today for sponsor and CRO oversight, you got a lot of insights into how things are done or how things should be done and different case examples. And so bringing this cast of characters together for this end of day panel, I thought was really relevant to this audience. So with that panel, we are going to talk about, we heard this morning Daniel Bennett gave, this is how a dictionary defines oversight. So I'm going to ask Kate Santoro, how do you define sponsor oversight?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Jamie. We work with a lot of sponsors and we understand that as vendors, we might push off the ownership of the TMF to the CRO or the vendors, but ultimately it's the sponsor's responsibility to make sure that the documentation is complete and accurate. So for me, making sure that the CRO and the sponsor are eye to eye with what's expected for the TMF, and then as the sponsor going in and checking periodically to make sure that the CRO is holding up their end of the bargain and that the documentation is coming in as it should be. That's probably what I would describe as oversight.
And so Karen, do you have anything further to add to that?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Kate said. And the way we look at it is that it's a collection of activities that are taken to ensure that the regulatory obligations for the trial are being met. And as Kate said, even though we outsource the trial, we are still, as the sponsor, ultimately responsible for it. So it all falls back to us to ensure that these obligations have been met. It's our responsibility to ensure that all of the documents have been appropriately collected and filed, and that the TMF is inspection ready. And it's also important to be able to demonstrate that you've done this oversight to the health authorities. So it's really important that you have evidence of this engagement between your sponsor and your partner to show that you did work together, you collaborated, and you've done your due diligence as the sponsor to ensure that everything has been collected appropriately and it is appropriately documented.
Thanks so much, Karen. So we're going to move now to a question that we're going to ask one of our CROs. I wish I had like a little wheel here. Ask the CRO, right? So Mof, you and I have worked together in the past in many different forums, and you were on the sponsor side in the past as well, similar to me, but now you're on the CRO side. So I was on sponsor, then CRO, and now back to sponsor. So what has been your experience with the evolution of oversight? Oh, you're on mute, sorry.
There's always one. Yeah, I've seen this change a lot in the last couple of years specifically, primarily around how we engage with our sponsors when it comes to oversight. So we get asked a lot of questions when we get audited by our sponsors. How often do we engage with them, the sponsors? Who has access to the TMF from the sponsor's perspective? When do they last log in? So what we're finding, especially with third-party auditors, is that they're trying to understand the interactions between both parties, both the CRO and the sponsor, making sure that they've got a good collaboration going on between both parties. So I've seen that type of question quite a bit and that evolution quite a bit. I think it's important for us as a CRO to foster those relationships, making sure that oversight has both parties' deliverables documented in the right way. So I've seen that evolution quite a bit, specifically from the questions that we get from auditors.
Thanks so much, Mo. Now I wasn't able to come off mute. We're trying to go on and off mute, everyone, so that there's not a lot of feedback. This next question is from my dear friend Mary. So Mary and I had the opportunity to work together in the past when she was at Daiichi Sankyo. And so, Mary, as Obi-Wan Kenobi has said, the Force will always be with you, always. So, tell us, Mary, ICH E6R2 in section 522, the sponsor, it says the sponsor should ensure oversight, always. Oversight of trial-related duties carried out by the CRO, blah, 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 including trial-related duties, functions that are subcontracted to another party. So the sponsor should always provide oversight. Is there anything that you did differently to address ICH E6R2 when it came out? Especially this always faction, right? So can you give us any insights there?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Jamie. So as Amutha started to allude to, you really need to make sure that you have everything documented and you have the responsibilities of both groups adequately documented. So we're going to go into some of these tools a little bit further in the panel discussion, but I just want to highlight, it's great to start out with your TMF plan. So your plan can really show who is responsible for which aspects of the trial master file. And you will be asked to show that plan if you have a regulatory authority, a health authority come in to inspect you. The other key piece is making sure that you actually have documentation of the checks and the oversight that you're doing. So it's great to say the plan says I'm going to do this, but then you're going to be asked, prove to me you did it. We all know if it's not documented, it wasn't done. So we need to make sure we keep those papers available, whether it be a tracking document, whether it be some type of form that states that somebody did do a quality check, whether it be showing something that an automated system generates for you, an audit trail or some type of report. We have to be very, very careful now to be able to show that as well. I've also recently been through an audit with the FDA, and they are looking at TMF. They had us going in and showing them what we were doing and the oversight that we were doing. So these are real world examples. This was just this past November. So my recommendation to everybody is make sure that you state what you're going to do, and then make sure you have documentation or something available to show that you actually did it.
That's great feedback, Mary. And actually, I'm monitoring the chat, so I'm very multitasking here. So to that point, a question has come through from Anonymous. So sorry that you don't want to say who you are, that's fine. But it says, I agree with everything you're saying. The sponsor is ultimately responsible. But if there's an inspection, they won't go to the CRO for information. Is that correct? So why don't we ask Tanya? Is that correct?
So that is mostly correct. Most of the time, they're going to go directly to the sponsor. And as a CRO, we're going to be there to help our sponsors in any way we can, in the system and support them if they are needing assistance in locating anything in the TMF or navigating through the TMF to get them what they need. But the regulatory authority is going to go to that sponsor. One of the things that we have done on our end is, make sure that we have increased our access level for our sponsor users, as well as provide, some in-depth training to any of the sponsor users so that they are more comfortable navigating within our system to help with this as well when they come across the situation.
Great, thank you, Tanya. Another interesting question has come through the chat, so thank you all for submitting. So there's a question about oversight of sites EIC. So is there, do any of you have any experience with conducting oversight of the site's EICF or E-Reg binder?
So Jamie, I don't have any direct experience in having access to where the site is keeping all that in an electronic fashion. But what I can tell you is one of the shifts that we did recently with COVID was to make sure that documents were available in electronic space for people to look at. So it wasn't it wasn't built to be an electronic system to begin with, but we adapted to go there. And yes, we did go in, review with our CRO CRAs we would go in and make sure that the checks were actually happening, and again, make sure that there was documentation around that.
Great, thanks, Mary. So we're going to go to another poll. Mike, if you can bring up poll number 2.
Should be live right now for all attendees.
All right, so poll number 2 is asking, how often do you conduct oversight? And let me just, there we go.
Just to correct, on the top right-hand side of the browser that you see, if you want to access polls, you should be able to see that. Another 30 seconds or so. Seems like there's one category of the ABCD that is really taking the lead.
So it looks like periodic. Quarterly. Quarterly is taking the lead. Let's see. Quarterly looks about 70%. Periodic. Oh, there's some yearly. 8%, 20%. All right. So if you want to probably end the poll now. So it looks like quarterly. Conducting oversight quarterly, 63%. Every 6 months is about 24%. Yearly is 10%. And then at least one is about 2%. All right. So, panel, you can all see those results, correct? In your. All right. So I'm going to ask Kate, what do you think of those responses?
I think that makes a lot of sense, Jamie. As a sponsor and with electronic systems now, we have the ability to be in the TMF a lot more. So rather than having the CRO manage our paper TMFs off-site somewhere and we might go to look at them once a year, we now have the ability to get in there and look more periodically. And so being in there on a quarterly basis, it makes a lot of sense to me. Absolutely.
Karen, how about you? Any other feedback on how the oversight is conducted with the quarterly as the highest percentage, and then every 6 months at 24%? Oops. And now you're on mute. Mike, I don't know if you can get them on and off mute.
Sorry about that. Here at Merck, we do quarterly as well, and I think quarterly, we feel that quarterly is a good place to start. You may do them more frequently as well, depending on the trial. It depends what kind of findings you're finding as well. So if you have concerns, you might want to do that a little bit more frequently. If you're very comfortable and you're working with somebody that's, really good, you might want to extend it out a little bit more. But it also is dependent on your resourcing and what you're seeing and what your trends are. But you really shouldn't let it go too far out of hand, because if you are seeing trends or issues, it's harder to correct and address those when they're too far out. The more frequently you can do it, I think the better off you'll be in the end.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to ask Mike if you can bring up poll number 3.
There we go. Poll number 3 should be live right now. Question is, you conduct your oversight, how is it done?
Yeah, so we're asking about what kind of oversight, percentages, sampling, risk-based, or something else. And then I'm going to have Mof, if you could give your review of the poll, that would be great.
Yeah. So it looks like risk-based about half at the moment. Oh, it's pretty even here, 33, 33, 33.
I'm glad to see something else is not selected. If I'm
It looks like a pretty even split across the three options. Oh, someone's put something else.
Oh, there you go. That must have been Russell.
Yeah, he did it to fox me, I'm sure. Hey, Russell. We're all friends.
Yeah. All right.
I think a third is pretty.
Yeah, looks like.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so Mo, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. It may just show the evolution of what's happening in our industry. I think we would all like to do some form of risk-based approach because it reduces our effort, so to speak. But I think it also speaks to how difficult it is to do risk-based. You have to have a robust process. You've got to be consistent where at all possible. 100%. From a sponsor perspective, we get asked to do 100% all the time. It's quite difficult to persuade a sponsor that we want to do risk-based or sampling because that's not necessarily what they're paying for. So it would be good to sort of agree as we look at oversight going forward between what a sponsor does, what a CRO does to try and move towards a more risk-based approach. There are some good papers on risk-based TMF reviews. The German paper that was 2015, 2016. Yeah. That's a really good approach for managing risk within a TMF. But it's something that I haven't seen that often. We're beginning to do that here at Worldwide. So yeah, this just speaks to there's different ways to demonstrate oversight.
Thank you. And so I think with that, my next question is going to be for Mary, and then Kate, I'll ask you to follow up with the response. And it's going to be, are you thinking about changing your oversight approach to be more risk-based? And if so, how?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that jumped out at me about the poll was I'm also wondering if the 100% review has to do with the person being on the sponsor side, as Mofa alluded to. So I think it's important for people to understand the environment that I come from is a fully outsourced model. While we do have some resources internally that are doing checks, we do expect 100% review. Unfortunately, on the CRO side, I'm not one of those that's quite comfortable yet moving to risk-based there, but we have started to move to risk-based of our own double checks. So we have trial managers or clinical trial associates who are doing a 10% review of the documents in the TMF, but we're also focusing them on the essential documents. We're not looking at 100% of all documents because not all of those have as much value add or as critical to the TMF. So we're focusing them on the essential portions of it. And then we also have a TMF manager in place who does a final check at a 5% to see in those same essential documents, what are they finding. We increase anything from a risk-based approach perspective or percentage based on those findings. If the error rate is less than 1%, we're pretty confident we've got a clean TMF. If anything comes in over that, we're increasing our percentages of review to see if that number drops or if the number continues to go up. And if it does, then we obviously have a bigger issue that we need to take back to the CRO and have conversations around the quality of our TMF.
So Kate, do you have anything to follow up?
That makes a lot of sense, Mary. I like that approach. I work for a smaller company, and we would love to implement a more risk-based approach with regard to our TMF reviews, but we're really kind of unsure how to do that at this moment. It's something we've talked about. When you talk about looking at your TMF from an individual quality of each individual document perspective versus completeness of whole sections, what would we expect? So we are doing 100% QC of each individual document to make sure that it's a quality document, but then our function leads will go in and do a 10% look at their sections to make sure that they're accurate and complete.
So Tanya, anything from your perspective from a CRO that you see with sponsors or how you're asked to QC the documents from an oversight perspective, from a risk-based perspective?
Yeah, so as Mo said earlier, from a CRO standpoint, for the most part, we're still doing 100% QC, Alcoa check of every document, and then 100% completeness check, because most sponsors are not going to be comfortable with a sampling, especially from a completeness standpoint, because if one section is complete, it doesn't always indicate that another will be. So we are still doing that. However, we are seeing from a sponsor side coming into the TMFs that are managed within our eTMF system, coming in and doing more of either a sampling or a risk-based approach on what they're checking of our work. Essentially, they'll go in, and we've seen it as Mary and Kate both mentioned on, maybe a percentage of essential documents. And then, with one sponsor they kind of do it on a tiered basis, where they've assigned, a tiered category of risk per each document type, and then they do a certain percentage based on that tier. And that seems to, kind of do a good comprehensive review without having to check 100% of all of the documents. And we're seeing more and more sponsors move to that. As Kate also mentioned, though, some of the little bit smaller biotech companies maybe haven't had a chance to implement that just yet, and still looking at how that can be done on their end. But that is what we're seeing, the move to within our systems.
Thanks so much. And just a reminder to everyone, for day 4 tomorrow, there is a panel that's going to talk about ICH, R3, and quality by design. So Dawn Nickham is the chair for tomorrow's day, and I know she put a lot of great speakers into the day tomorrow, all around QBD. So another acronym for all of you, QBD. But all about risk management and risk-based approach. So stay tuned for tomorrow's day 4 and that panel discussion at the end of the day. So I think, Mike, if we can go to the next poll. And I think
That should be
so
live right now. Yep.
yeah, so we want to find out, how is your oversight documented? So Karen, I'm going to ask you to comment on this poll. So we will, the poll is live now. So system generated metrics, note to file, other, a quality check or QC oversight check certificate being put into the system, other, put it in the chat, A, B, and C. Let us know. And, all right, Karen, I'll let you comment.
So it looks like the system generated metrics and the QC certificates are up there, but we also have the notes to file. So those are the three, the three top, not too much down there in other. But I think system generated metrics are something that's very important, because you can get those out of the system pretty easily in most of the eTMFs, if not all of them. And it's a good way for you to check the timeliness of your documents. It makes it very easy to see if you've got all of your key documents. And I think it's important, and that's something that you can also then take those reports and then file them. For us, we file those in our eTMF as well to demonstrate that we have looked at those things. And if we see trends, we would do a more intensive search and increase our risk-based approaches for that as well. It looks like some do document it in a note to file. And again, as long as you're doing that review and you're documenting it and documenting that overview that you're doing for your vendors, I think you're in good shape. But it's really important that you do that. And again, I think the system generated metrics are easy. You have your certificates. Your certificates are good, but I'm not really familiar with the QC certificate, so I don't know how that really documents what you've looked at. So I don't know if anybody else on the panel has any information about certificates, how they work.
Yeah, maybe I can speak to that. So certificates typically list out what you checked, how you checked it, who reviewed it, what did you find. It gives you a summary of the issues that you have found within a particular section or zone. So it's a good way to sort of document, what approach you've taken. One word of caution in relation to notes and files is just around it shouldn't be an excuse note. You know, I didn't do this, we didn't submit that. Look at your deviation process. There's most likely a reason why that didn't occur. So, you know, document that as a deviation. Move away from your note to files, because that has caused problems for many of us over the years. But just using that as an excuse note. So I'll just be wary of those.
Thank you. So, Tanya, I have a question for you. So what kind of metrics reports do you see created to aid and sponsor oversight of how you as a CRO, how you're doing with your filing into the TMF, completeness, quality, things like that? So what kind of metrics reports are created and used by the sponsor?
So with our, at Syneos Health, one of the things that we do is create a TMF health report that we provide out to our sponsors on a monthly basis that gives an overview of, a snapshot in time of the TMF completeness, an overview of the timeliness for document filing, as well as any, our completeness reviews are done milestone and event-based. So it also even provides an overview of where we are at with those milestone reviews for completeness. You know, are they occurring on time? Are they late? Are they pending? You know, where those are at. And we kind of give this, you know, holistic overview in this monthly snapshot report. But we also within our system have, you know, real-time dashboards for our sponsors to go in and access at any time. So they can see as of today exactly what's happening and what the status and health of their TMF is. And then that is where we take those, you know, monthly health reports, and then we file those directly in the TMF so that we have that record ongoing on a monthly basis. So it really does help our sponsors, but you know, one of the things it doesn't do with that, and that is highly recommended, is documenting that the sponsor reviewed that report. Because while the report is there, there's no documentation that says the sponsor looked at it, even though it's filed. You know, how do we know from, you know, how does the regulatory agency know that you as a sponsor individual actually viewed that report and analyzed it and reviewed it? So that is one of the things that we have started some recent discussions on within our company on how we might be able to assist with that piece of it as well.
So follow-up question, Mary and Kate, I'm going to ask you to Tanya's point around what does the sponsor do with the report that they generate, but also as a sponsor, how are you looking at what the CRO provides and then documenting your own oversight? So Kate, I'll ask you to start, and then Mary.
Sure. We have our system set up so that we can do functional QCs directly in the system. So we can log that somebody has looked at that document. So that's great for making sure that we can show the documentation that we've done that. And the thought behind that is if vendor or CRO is responsible for the documentation in that section, we're making sure that somebody at the sponsor is actually looking at the documents the vendor created and submitted to confirm that they are accurate. The other thing that we've done is we've done those certificates. I've done those. The problem with them can be that if somebody forgets to do one, then you have to go back and make sure that it was done. We've also been presenting TMF metrics and presenting TMF oversight as part of the clinical trial meeting. So the study team meetings will meet. We provide the metrics there with the CRO there, and then that documentation gets put in the meeting minutes so we can show that we've done our oversight and that we communicated what the issues were.
Mary, anything further to add?
Sure.
As well.
Yep. So we're kind of in a transition mode in certain aspects. So we revamped our TMF plan at the end of last year. So I'll give a shout out to the DIA reference model working group for their template. I know Jamie's involved there as well. So we did take that template model, and then we also added a review form to that. So what we're actually doing afterwards is documenting that a review did actually take place, whether it be a quarterly review by somebody internally, ongoing monthly reviews by the CRO. We're looking to leverage our systems the best we can moving forward, but we're not there with everything yet. So in the meantime, we're using trackers. Yes, we still have Excel trackers, and we're taking those Excel trackers and the forms, and we're putting them together to show the documentation and the checks that we're doing. And then what our future state hopefully will be is being more in line with what Kate is doing and really being able to leverage the systems that we have. We require CROs to use our TMF, which can sometimes make it a little more difficult for the CROs because they may not be the ones who are building the dashboards, who are building in all of the different checks that we have. So we're kind of in between right now, but we're moving to really utilizing the systems a lot more and being able to have it documented there as well.
Fantastic. So there's a couple questions that came in through the chat. They're now in the question queue. So there is one that came in from, hang on, trying to get to the, okay. So to what extent is it possible to conduct oversight just using eTMF functionality? So looking for collective experience of efficiency, completeness using an eTMF system. So I'll open it up to the group. Keeping your system agnostic, if you want to respond to that question.
I can start. We actually set up our system so that we can have those checks directly in the system. So it is an action that is performed by our functional leads, and they kind of mark off the document electronically to show that an extra check was done. I also know that there are some systems that can track quote unquote inspection readiness. So if a team determines that a 1572 and all the CVs or whatnot are inspection ready, you could check off that that work has been done and then kind of lock that down so you don't have to look at that in the future.
Yeah, I'll add to that. As Kate says, it really depends on how you've configured your system. So some systems are very good at, getting information about the study in, so for milestones or for events, et cetera, and if you can get that within your system, that's really, really helpful, to help demonstrate oversight. As a CRO, we get asked to work in many different eTMF systems out there. We see a variety of approach in terms of how to, manage QC, how to check for timeliness. So it's really important to make sure that you look at end-to-end what process you want to augment, and then making sure that we can actually do the oversight piece of that. It's crucial. Configuration is everything. If you configure the system incorrectly, it really hinders your ability to do oversight.
Fantastic. Here's another question from the audience. So Katie asked, currently, this is a great question because we all have this challenge, no matter what company, and especially during COVID, I would imagine. But when you have resource issues that are causing then a trickle-down effect of delays in document submission and then QC and then publication, how do you handle that when there's just not enough people?
Go ahead, Mary. I'm sorry.
No, you go, Katie.
I was just going to say, Katie, there's never enough people, especially for TMF. I think we've all run into that situation where resourcing has been an issue. For me, I think just documenting how you're addressing the situation, whether you have one study that's backlogged on document submission and trying to throw a bunch of resources on that 1 week at a time, but whatever method you put in place, just documenting what you've done to try and overcome that backlog, I think is important.
Yeah, from a CRO perspective, just be transparent. Sometimes things happen, if that makes sense. So I think you have to, explain what the issue is, more importantly, how it's going to be fixed and in which timeline it's going to be, and then provide those checkpoint to say, okay, we've reached here, we've dealt with half of the issue, and the other half is going to be done at this time. But interact with your sponsors. I think that's really important. No study is perfect. Both from a TMF perspective, but also in study execution. So I think it's important just to, as part of the partnership, is be honest, be transparent, and I think that really helps.
So here's another question from the audience. Yep, thanks, Mof. And it's regarding the EICF and the E-Reg binder. So some sites, like a large hospital, they may have their own solution, which might differ from a sponsor solution. So how does a sponsor tackle this if they want a central solution that can be used, as well as the administration and oversight governed by a single process? So is there anyone that wants to respond to that?
I'm not sure how easy that is. I think if you're a sponsor, if you pay for it, it may help adoption, but that is not always possible from a sponsor perspective. I think because there's so many different parties involved in the process, it's difficult to get that one environment in which you can work in. Ideally, that's what we all would like, but the ISF is separate, as we all know, from the sponsor TMF, and that has its own dynamics. We find more progressive sites, those sites that are, I guess, professional individuals that are professionally managing clinical trials. They will go out and purchase their own systems, to manage these activities. But for some of the other sites that are more, focused on the medicine, and making, treating patients, so to speak, they may have a different ethos in terms of how they manage their clinical trials. So I think it's really important. It's difficult to sort of have a one-size-fits-all approach to that. But if anyone has a solution, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mof. As Yoda has said, do or do not. There's no try. So I think we have to all, either do it or don't do it, but maybe come together. And I know within the TMF reference model, and Fran, I know, is on this call, big proponent for the EICF and, what we might be able to do as an industry further in that space, but certainly some opportunity there. All right, so I'm just taking a look at the time. We're gonna run, I'm gonna go, one more question that came in, and then we'll go to another poll. So this question is talking about balanced oversight, so that there's passive and active driving quality of execution. And can you elaborate on risk-based principles that could be used? And actually, that might be a question that could be asked to the panel tomorrow, now that I think about it, for the QBD. So why don't we say that unless someone has a quick response. All right, so let's save that for tomorrow's panel. I'll send that over to Dawn for her panel tomorrow. So Mike, if you could bring up the last poll. In this last poll, we're going to ask about outsourcing of the TMF and the sponsor. So if we can bring that up, that'd be great. And I'm going to ask, let's see, Mary, I'm going to ask you to respond to the poll as the numbers are coming in.
Okay. So right now, we're getting about 80, it looks like, well, now we're at probably a pretty clear winner so far for yes. If your TMF is outsourced to CROs, you request access to the CRO's eTMF. It looks like we've got a small percentage that has a hybrid approach. Luckily, a lot of people are saying no to requesting access, and there's only less than 10%, about 8% that are not sure, so that's a good thing as well. So it looks like our clear winner is still yes. that people are requesting access to the CRO's eTMFs.
All right. So want to get your feedback here from the panel on, and we're going to start with, I think, Tanya. Tanya, I switched it up a little. So as a CRO, what do you provide to the sponsor to assist them in accessing your system and conducting their oversight in your CRO system?
That's a good question, Jamie. So we highly encourage our sponsors to get access to the eTMF system and be in there, become comfortable with it, navigate through it. We have some online training that we give them in order to even receive access to the system. But then we have our TMF lead group that will do a more one-on-one kind of based training with groups of sponsor users to make sure that they are comfortable in there, and that they have someone they can go to if they're in the system and have any questions or concerns or aren't finding quite what they're looking for, because as you know, every eTMF system is a little different. And as Mo said earlier, even if you have the same system, it can be configured differently. So it's always going to be a challenge for sponsors that are using multiple CROs with multiple systems, for a sponsor user to be comfortable within all of those different systems. So we're very happy to assist them with that. And again, we highly encourage the access. That's where we also have, our real-time dashboards and everything viewable to our sponsors so they can see, the real-time health and status of their TMF. We do not currently have an oversight workflow built into our configuration specifically for the sponsor, but we do have collaboration activities built into our system to where if they need to collaborate maybe on a plan document or something along those lines, they can all do that within the system. But the oversight maybe workflow is something we're looking at as a potential future implementation and configuration of our system to allow sponsors to document their oversight directly within our system in that manner instead of filing a separate document for it.
Thanks, Tanya. And Kate, any, from a sponsor perspective, what's helpful to you if you have to use a CRO system? Do you have to use a CRO system at all?
No, in my experience, Jamie, we've made the CROs use our system,
Mine
which,
too.
and, I've worked mostly for smaller companies and we've been able to successfully do that, and that's been great. I know that what now, like I've learned so much over the past couple of years, especially using different eTMF systems, that if I were to join a company and I would need to look at the CRO system, I would feel more savvy in being able to ask for different metrics or being able to create an oversight process within that CRO's system. But thankfully, I haven't had to do that yet.
Yeah. And Mary and Karen, that's your experience as well?
100%. They have to use our system. Sorry to my CRO partners and to anybody who represents the CRO. I'm sure it's a nightmare on your side to deal with all these different systems that sponsors are using, but it gives me that extra feeling of confidence that I have true line of sight into what my TMFs look like and I have full control. So they need to come to me, I don't go to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me just comment on that. I wouldn't call it a nightmare. I think it's just a case of getting the information out. As long as we can all get the information out to enable us as CROs to do our deliverables that we're doing on your behalf, it's not a nightmare. Sometimes what we find is that the permissions are so restrictive, that's when it's a nightmare. So as long as we can share that we need this, can you provide it to us, then it does work.
That makes me feel less guilty. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both for saying that. We will all remember that.
It's not always perfect. I'm gonna chat back. It's not always perfect, but as long as we can get the information out, it's really, really helpful for us.
So I have probably one last question. This is about sub-vendors. So sometimes there might be a global CRO, and then that global CRO has outsourced to a small CRO in, let's say, Bulgaria or Budapest, my favorite city. So how do you, as sponsors, conduct your oversight on that little Budapest maybe outsourced vendor? Any of the sponsors want to comment on that, and then we'll ask the CROs as well.
I don't have any experience in that area.
I wouldn't think that it would change. I mean, if we're doing oversight for the CRO and now we know that there's a sub CRO in there, you know, if we're doing a 10% oversight check, then we would do the 10% oversight check for that sub CRO too. And then, like Mary said, if you, depending on the findings, you might increase your review of those documents.
Okay.
So I'm still living this in certain instances, and normally the larger CRO has a system in place. They're populating our TMF, you know, depends on when we've taken over the trial, if we didn't start it to begin with. But I'm finding that some of these regional CROs, so for instance, one we recently did where Turkey was involved, we weren't able to have access to an electronic eTMF for the work that was done in Turkey. We only had access to what was in our TMF for the larger US-based portion of the program. So it does add complexities. So you either have to find a way to get some type of TMF documentation available to you in another fashion, whether it be a secure portal, whatever it might be, to do your ongoing reviews, or you're going to find yourself in a state where your review comes at the end when they send you all the paper, and then it's usually too late to fix it. And unfortunately, that still is happening out there because I've had it happen in the last 6 months. So, yep.
And so that's interesting, right? Because when I first joined Daiichi Sankyo, we did have sub-CROs underneath global CROs, you know, in these little, you know, countries, if you will, and no access to your point. And so that was probably 5 years ago. So that's still relevant today, and trying to get access into those. So we have probably 2 minutes left. Just taking a look at the chat, if there's any in the Q&A as well. There's been lots of chatter going on in both. I can tell you, I've been trying to keep up. So I apologize if I did not see any of your very important questions. If you have them now, please put it in. It'll help me not have to scroll. And I think as we're waiting for that, I was just going to, yeah, so I'm not seeing anything else coming through. All right. So I guess I will then close with another quote from our dear friend Yoda. And that is, when gone am I, the last of the Jedi you will all be. The Force runs strong in you. Pass on what you have learned. So with that, we will close out. Again, these are great networking opportunities for all of you to learn and share. And hopefully at the next one, you'll be here presenting to all of us. So have a great day, everyone. See you at day 4 tomorrow and day 5. Day 5, there's a great panel. Yours truly will be on it talking about the future and technology. So please join us, and we'll hope to see you again soon, face to face in the future. So thank you all, and thank you to the panel. And we are closing on time. This will be the only meeting probably of your day that finishes on time. I know it's mine. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.